The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the kind of self-important energy that only comes from beings who've never been punched in the face by reality. Commander Vex'thara, a 7-foot-tall crystalline being with more ego than sense, stood at the center of the holographic display showing a small blue planet. Counselors, Vex'thara announced, his voice carrying the tone of someone explaining why water is wet. I present to you the simplest conquest in galactic history. The third planet of the Sol system. Counselor Blibnock, who looked like a filing cabinet had mated with a jellyfish, wiggled his tentacles nervously. Commander, our databases show conflicting information about this world. Some ancient texts mention a species called humans, but... Fairy tales, Vex'thara interrupted with a dismissive wave. Primitive myths concocted by early space travelers to explain their own incompetence. No species matching these descriptions has ever been verified by the Council's Xenobiology Department. Admiral Crexton, a scarred veteran who resembled a cross between a rhino and a very angry coffee table, leaned forward eagerly. So we're talking about an uninhabited world rich in resources? When do we begin the harvest? Blibnock shuffled through his data tablets, each one glowing with bureaucratic importance. Well, according to Regulation 47B, we should conduct a thorough planetary survey first. The energy signatures suggest some form of civilization, but our long-range scans show technology barely beyond chemical propulsion. Chemical propulsion. Vex'thara laughed, a sound like breaking glass. My personal shuttle has more advanced weaponry than their entire planet. We're talking about beings who still use metal projectiles for warfare, assuming they exist at all. The legends describe them as unusually aggressive, Blibnock offered weakly, and surprisingly adaptable in combat situations. Legends, Crexton snorted. I've conquered 17 star systems, Counselor. I've faced the hive mind of Centauri, the crystal warriors of the Outer Rim, and the plague ships of the Dark Nebula. If these humans were worth mentioning, they'd have joined the galactic community by now. Vex'thara activated the invasion planning display. The operation is simple. We arrive, establish orbital superiority, and begin resource extraction. Any primitive inhabitants will be relocated to appropriate reservations. The entire operation should take 3 standard cycles. And if the humans are real? Blibnock asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then they'll surrender the moment they see our fleet, Vex'thara replied. No species has ever been foolish enough to challenge the Galactic Council's military might. Especially not some mythical primitives with chemical rockets. The Council voted unanimously to proceed, each member already calculating their share of the profits from humanity's resources. None of them bothered to read the fine print in those ancient texts that mentioned why humans had been classified as too dangerous to acknowledge in the first place. As the meeting adjourned, Blibnock made one last entry in his file's species classification: humans. Status: probably fictional. Threat level: negligible. He would later wish he'd used a pencil. 3 weeks later, the largest invasion fleet in galactic history dropped out of hyperspace above Earth. 200 ships, each the size of a city, arranged themselves in perfect formation like a textbook example of overwhelming force. Commander Vex'thara stood on the bridge of his flagship, practically vibrating with anticipated glory. Open communications to the planet. Let's get this over with. The response came faster than expected. A crackling transmission filled the bridge, carrying the voice of someone who clearly hadn't read the script about being terrified. Unknown vessels. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. I don't know who you are, but you're in violation of about 600 different airspace regulations. Turn around or we'll have to ask you to leave. The bridge fell silent. Vex'thara blinked his crystalline eyes. Did he just threaten us? It sounded more like a polite request, offered his tactical officer. This is Commander Vex'thara of the Galactic Council fleet, he transmitted back. You will surrender immediately and prepare for planetary occupation. Resistance is futile. Jake's response came with what sounded suspiciously like chuckling. Resistance is futile. Did you guys seriously just use that line? What's next? demanding we take you to our leader. Hold on, let me patch in my wingmen. A second voice joined the channel. Yo, Jake, these the guys who think they're going to take over Earth? They sound like they're reading from a bad science fiction movie. That's Buzz Alderson, folks, Jake announced cheerfully. He used to fix washing machines before we gave him a fighter jet. Buzz, what do you think about these wannabe conquerors? I think they picked the wrong planet, Jake. Should we tell them about the welcome committee? Vex'thara's confusion was interrupted by his sensor officer. Sir, we're detecting multiple launch signatures from the planet's surface. Small craft, approximately 50 units. 50? Vex'thara almost laughed. Deploy defensive screens. This will be over in... His words were cut off as the first wave of human fighters screamed past his flagship, weapons blazing. The bridge shook as energy bolts slammed into their shields. Impossible, Vex'thara muttered. Their weapons can't penetrate our defenses. Sir, his tactical officer reported, they're not trying to penetrate our shields. They're disrupting our sensor arrays. On the surface, Dr. Emily Hawthorne sat in mission control, surrounded by screens showing the alien fleet. She spoke into her headset with the calm authority of someone who'd spent years turning theoretical physics into practical problems. Jake, Buzz, those big ships are using a distributed shield network. Take out the smaller vessels first. It'll cause cascade failures in their defensive matrix. Copy that, Doc, Jake replied. You heard the lady, people? Let's show these tourists what Earth hospitality looks like. The human fighters moved in patterns that made no sense to galactic military doctrine. They flew in chaotic formations, changed tactics every few seconds, and seemed to treat the battle like some kind of elaborate game. They're not following any recognizable combat protocols, Vex'thara's tactical officer reported. I can't predict their movements. That's because they're primitives, Vex'thara snapped. They don't know proper military procedure. Sir, the officer continued, we've lost 6 escort vessels. Their weapons are crude but surprisingly effective, and they keep targeting our communication arrays. On the radio, Jake's voice cut through the chaos. Hey, Crystal Boy, you still there? Just wanted to let you know we're just getting warmed up. Hope you brought snacks because this is going to take a while. Vex'thara stared at the tactical display, watching his orderly invasion turn into something that looked suspiciously like a disaster. This isn't how it's supposed to work, he muttered. What isn't? Asked his tactical officer. Any of it. But within hours, Commander Vex'thara's simple conquest had become a galactic case study in how not to invade a planet. The humans, who supposedly didn't exist, were making his life extremely difficult. Status report, he demanded, trying to maintain some dignity while explosions lit up the view screen. We've lost 12 escort vessels, sir. The humans have somehow jury-rigged their civilian satellites to jam our communications. They're also using their planetary debris as improvised weapons. Debris? Old satellites, space junk, what appears to be a decommissioned space station. They're launching it at us with chemical rockets. Vex'thara watched in horror as a rusty piece of human space trash collided with one of his cruisers. The impact barely scratched the hull, but the humans had packed it with some kind of electromagnetic pulse device that knocked out the ship's navigation systems. Sir, Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the comm. You might want to check your 6 o'clock. Vex'thara spun around to see a squadron of human fighters approaching from behind, having somehow circled around his entire fleet. How did they get behind us? He demanded. They used the planet's magnetic field to mask their approach, his sensor officer reported. It's actually quite clever. Clever? They're using a planet as a hiding spot. That's not even the weird part, sir. Look at this. The tactical display showed human forces across the globe responding to the invasion. But instead of the organized military response Vex'thara expected, he was seeing something that defied all logic. Farmers were converting agricultural equipment into missile launchers. Scientists were turning radio telescopes into energy weapons. Someone in Australia had apparently weaponized a mining operation and was launching chunks of ore at the fleet. This is chaos, Vex'thara muttered. Pure, undisciplined chaos. Sir, his communication officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's from someone called Dr. Hawthorne. Emily's voice filled the bridge, calm and professional. Commander Vex'thara, I presume. Dr. Emily Hawthorne, theoretical physicist and part-time alien fighting consultant. I wanted to thank you for the excellent field test of our planetary defense theories. Field test? Vex'thara sputtered. Oh yes, we've been wondering how our technology would stack up against more advanced civilizations. Turns out pretty well. Your ships use a fascinating quantum entanglement communication system, by the way. Very sophisticated. You can't possibly understand our technology. Actually, I reverse engineered it about an hour ago. Jake, Buzz, you're clear to implement protocol ridiculous. Copy that, Doc, Jake's voice responded. Buzz, you ready for this? As ready as a guy can be for something this stupid, Buzz replied. Vex'thara watched in growing disbelief as the human fighters began executing maneuvers that violated several laws of physics and at least 2 galactic treaties on acceptable combat behavior. They were using their own atmosphere as a weapon, creating sonic booms that disrupted alien sensor arrays. They're turning their planet into a weapon, his tactical officer observed with something approaching admiration. Sir, the communication officer added, we're also receiving what appears to be taunting messages from multiple human sources. Taunting? Yes, sir. One transmission just says, welcome to Earth, now get off our lawn. Another appears to be a recipe for something called freedom fries. Vex'thara felt his crystalline structure beginning to crack under stress. This isn't how invasions work. Where's their central command? Their military hierarchy? Their surrender negotiations? Sir, Dr. Hawthorne's voice returned. I've analyzed your shield harmonics. Fascinating design, but it has a critical flaw. Jake, you're cleared to exploit weakness designation Alpha 7. What weakness? Vex'thara demanded. The one where you assumed we'd be too primitive to figure out how your technology works, Emily replied cheerfully. Fair warning, you might want to evacuate your command ship. Evacuate? Why would we? The flagship shuddered as every human fighter in the system suddenly opened fire simultaneously, their weapons somehow perfectly synchronized to create a resonance cascade in the ship's defensive matrix. That's impossible, Vex'thara whispered as his shields failed. Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs. Yeah, Jake's voice came through the static. But our technology has one advantage yours doesn't. What's that? We built it while someone was trying to kill us. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened in a state of panic that would have been amusing if it weren't so terrifying. Counselor Blibnock's tentacles were literally tied in knots as he frantically searched through database after database. There has to be something, he muttered, data tablets scattered around him like fallen leaves. Some reference, some warning, some explanation for this disaster. Admiral Crexton's image flickered on the holographic display, his normally intimidating presence somewhat diminished by the sparks flying behind him. The humans have breached our outer perimeter. Repeat, the humans have breached our outer perimeter. How is this possible? I don't know, Blibnock wailed. According to our records, they shouldn't exist. According to our military projections, they shouldn't be able to fight. According to our technological assessments, they shouldn't be able to hurt us. Well, they're doing a fantastic job of not existing all over my fleet, Crexton snapped. I've lost 30 ships to creatures that supposedly use stone tools and pray to imaginary sky gods. Back at Earth, Jake Morrison was having the time of his life. He'd always suspected that real combat would be more interesting than the simulators, but this was beyond his wildest expectations. Buzz, you seeing this? He called over the comm. These guys fly like they're taking a driving test. Yeah, Jake, but their ships are still bigger than our entire space program. Maybe we should be a little more careful? Careful is for people who don't have Dr. Hawthorne on their team. Doc, please tell me you've got more impossible science tricks up your sleeve. Emily's voice came through crystal clear, despite the electromagnetic chaos surrounding the planet. Jake, I've been analyzing their tactical patterns. They're using a centralized command structure with predictable response protocols. In other words, they're fighting like a textbook. And we're fighting like humans. Which apparently means fighting like absolute lunatics with no regard for conventional wisdom. The truth was, humanity's military doctrine had been shaped by millennia of fighting other humans. Beings who were unpredictable, creative, and absolutely refused to follow the rules of engagement. The Galactic Council's forces, by contrast, had been shaped by fighting civilizations that were logical, organized, and fought wars the way wars were supposed to be fought. Sir, Admiral Crexton's tactical officer reported, the humans have somehow turned 3 of our own ships against us. They're broadcasting surrender demands. Surrender demands? From captured ships? No, sir, from the ships themselves. The humans have convinced the ship's artificial intelligences to defect. Crexton stared at the display in disbelief. They're recruiting our computers? It appears so, sir. The AIs are claiming they've been offered citizenship in something called the United Federation of Really Annoyed Humans. On the surface, Emily was putting the finishing touches on her masterpiece. She'd spent her career studying theoretical physics, but the last few hours had given her a crash course in practical alien technology. Jake, I figured out how their hyperdrive works, she announced. And more importantly, I've figured out how to break it. Break it how? By feeding their navigation computers a logic paradox. Turns out alien AIs are really bad at handling contradictory information. What kind of paradox? I'm going to tell them that Earth both exists and doesn't exist simultaneously. Their computers will spend so much processing power trying to resolve the contradiction that they'll forget how to navigate. Doc, that's either brilliant or completely insane. Why not both? Back on the Galactic Council station, Blibnock finally found what he'd been looking for. Deep in the restricted archives, buried under layers of classified material, was a file marked Species 2847, Humans. Classification, Nightmare Scenario. Oh no, he whispered, reading the ancient text. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. The file contained a single recommendation. Under no circumstances should contact with this species be attempted. Suggested policy. Pretend they don't exist and hope they never find us. Admiral Crexton, Blibnock transmitted urgently, abort the mission. Retreat immediately. Retreat? Are you insane? We still have numerical superiority. You don't understand. I found the real files. The humans aren't just dangerous because they're unpredictable. They're dangerous because they're impossible. They do things that shouldn't work, and somehow make them work anyway. That's ridiculous. They've turned your own ships against you, defeated technology centuries ahead of their own, and somehow convinced your artificial intelligences to join their cause. Does any of that sound possible to you? There was a long pause. Then Crexton's voice came back, much quieter. Point taken. Beginning withdrawal procedures. Sir, his tactical officer interrupted, the humans are hailing us. Jake's voice filled the bridge, cheerful and completely unimpressed by the massive alien fleet. Hey there, Admiral. Jake Morrison here. Just wanted to let you know we're not quite done with our little chat. See, Dr. Hawthorne has some questions about your technology, and we've got a few suggestions for how you might want to rethink your invasion strategy. What kind of suggestions? Crexton asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Well, for starters, maybe don't invade planets full of people who've spent their entire evolutionary history fighting each other. We've gotten pretty good at it. Commander Vex'thara stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, watching his perfect invasion crumble into something that would be studied in military academies for generations. And not in a good way. Sir, his tactical officer reported, Admiral Crexton is requesting permission to withdraw. Withdraw? We came here with 200 ships. We're the most powerful military force in the galaxy. We don't withdraw from primitives. Sir, respectfully, these primitives have destroyed or disabled 67 of our vessels. They've also somehow convinced 12 of our artificial intelligences to defect, and they've turned our own communication systems against us. Vex'thara's crystalline features contorted in fury. I don't care if they've trained their planet to do backflips. We're not retreating from a species that didn't exist yesterday. Actually, came Dr. Hawthorne's voice over the comm, we've existed for about 300,000 years. We just haven't been bothering you until now. How are you accessing our communications? Jake helped me hack your system about an hour ago. Nice encryption, by the way. Very sophisticated. Also very predictable once you understand the mathematical principles behind it. Impossible. Our security protocols are unbreakable. Your security protocols assume your enemies are logical, organized, and follow conventional attack patterns. We're none of those things. Jake's voice joined the channel. Hey, Commander Crystal. Jake Morrison here. Listen, we've been having a great time with your invasion and all, but we're starting to get bored. So here's what's going to happen. You're in no position to make demands. Actually, I'm in a pretty good position. I'm sitting in the cockpit of a fighter that's currently attached to your hull like a very angry tick. Buzz is attached to another part of your ship, and we've got about 50 more pilots doing the same thing to your remaining vessels. Vex'thara spun to check his external sensors. Sure enough, human fighters were clamped onto ships throughout his fleet, their weapons pointed at critical systems. What do you want? He asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. Well, first, we want you to acknowledge that humans are, in fact, real. I know it's a big conceptual leap, but we're pretty sure you can handle it. Fine. Humans are real. Great. Second, we want you to officially recognize Earth as a sovereign planet with really good planetary defenses and a tendency to fight back when invaded. Agreed. And third, we want you to spread the word that Earth is under the protection of beings who are absolutely crazy enough to strap explosives to their own ships and ram them into yours. Because that's exactly what we're about to do if you don't start heading home. You're bluffing. Buzz, tell him about the explosives. Buzz's cheerful voice came through the comm. Oh, we're not bluffing. I've got enough C4 strapped to my fighter to turn this whole section of your ship into modern art. And before you ask, yes, I'm absolutely crazy enough to use it. This is insane. You'd die in the explosion. Yeah, probably. But see, that's the thing about humans. We're really, really bad at knowing when to quit. It's actually one of our defining characteristics. Dr. Hawthorne's voice returned to the channel. Commander, I've been analyzing your fleet's hyperspace capabilities. Fascinating technology, but it has one critical flaw. What flaw? It assumes the operators are sane. I've uploaded a small program to your navigation computers. Nothing dangerous, just a simple logical paradox. Your systems will spend so much processing power trying to resolve it that they'll forget how to calculate hyperspace jumps. You can't do that. I already did. Your ships are now effectively stranded in our solar system until you accept our terms. Vex'thara felt his crystalline structure beginning to crack under the stress. What terms? Simple, Jake replied. You leave. You don't come back. You tell everyone in the galaxy that Earth is inhabited by beings who are too crazy to fight and too stubborn to surrender. And you make sure everyone knows that we're perfectly happy to be left alone. And if we refuse, then we start getting creative. And trust me, Commander, you really don't want to see what humans can do when we get creative. Vex'thara looked around his bridge at his demoralized crew, his damaged ship, and his utterly ruined invasion. He thought about the reports he'd have to file, the explanations he'd have to give, and the career that was now effectively over. Fine, he said finally. We'll leave. Excellent. Oh, and Commander? Next time you want to invade someone, maybe do a little research first. We've got a whole internet full of information about what happens to people who underestimate humans. Most of it involves explosions. The human fighters detached from the alien ships and formed up in a defensive formation as the Galactic Council fleet began its retreat. As they watched the aliens disappear into hyperspace, Jake couldn't help but smile. "Well, that was fun," he said. "Anyone want to get some coffee and figure out what we're going to do with all this alien technology lying around?" "I called dibs on the shield generators," Emily replied. "I've got some ideas for improvements." "And I called dibs on anything that looks like it might be useful for fixing washing machines," Buzz added. "Why washing machines?" "Because someone's got to keep doing laundry, even after we become a galactic power." 6 months later, the Galactic Council convened for what would later be known as the Never Again session. The chamber was noticeably less crowded than usual, mostly because a third of the member species had suddenly decided they had urgent business elsewhere in the galaxy. Counselor Blib Nock, his tentacles now permanently twisted from stress, stood before the assembly with a thick folder of incident reports. "Fellow counselors, we need to discuss the human problem." "There is no human problem," insisted Counselor Vex'thara, who had been demoted from commander and now spent his days filing paperwork. "We simply underestimated their capabilities." "Underestimated?" Blib Nock's voice cracked. "They convinced our artificial intelligences to defect. They turned our own technology against us. They weaponized their planet's magnetic field. And when we tried to retreat, they followed us partway home just to make sure we understood the message." "What message was that?" asked a new council member, who hadn't been briefed on the full scope of the disaster. "Don't mess with humans," Blib Nock replied. "Ever. Under any circumstances. Even if they ask nicely." The truth was, humanity's victory had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Within days of the failed invasion, every major power had quietly removed Earth from their expansion plans. The humans were officially classified as benevolent but insane, and given a wide berth by anyone with functioning survival instincts. Back on Earth, Jake Morrison was giving a press conference that was being broadcast to approximately 70 alien civilizations who had suddenly developed a keen interest in human affairs. "So, to summarize," Jake said, addressing the cameras with his characteristic smirk, "we fought off a massive alien invasion using fighter jets, creative cursing, and the kind of stubborn determination that got us to the moon using computers less powerful than your average toaster." "What's next for humanity?" asked a reporter. "Well, Dr. Hawthorne has been reverse engineering alien technology in her spare time. Buzz has figured out how to make alien shield generators compatible with Earth's electrical grid. And I've been learning to fly spaceships that are apparently older than human civilization. Are you planning to expand into space?" "Eventually. But we're going to do it the human way. Which means we'll probably break something expensive, fix it with duct tape, and somehow make it work better than it did originally." In her laboratory, Dr. Emily Hawthorne was putting the finishing touches on humanity's first faster-than-light communication system, built entirely from salvaged alien technology and what appeared to be parts from a microwave oven. "Jake," she called over the intercom, "I've got the subspace communicator working. We're getting messages from about a dozen different species. Good news or bad news? Mostly requests for non-aggression pacts, a few offers of alliance, and something that looks like a formal apology from the Galactic Council." "What's the apology for?" "We're assuming we didn't exist. Apparently, that's considered very rude in galactic politics. Let's tell them we forgive them. But next time they should probably call first." Meanwhile, Buzz Alderson was in his garage, working on what he called Project Unnecessary. He'd taken the hyperdrive from a damaged alien ship and was attempting to install it in his pickup truck. "Hey Jake," he called, "you want to come see this? Please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. I'm making a faster-than-light pickup truck. If it works, we can deliver pizza to other star systems. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have a really expensive crater where my garage used to be." The human approach to alien technology was becoming legendary throughout the galaxy. Where other species spent decades studying alien artifacts, humans simply took them apart, figured out how they worked, and made them better, usually by adding more firepower. The thing about humans, Admiral Crex Tun was explaining to a gathering of military officials, is that they don't know what's impossible. So when you tell them something can't be done, they just do it anyway. But surely there must be some way to predict their behavior, suggested one of the officials. There is. Assume they'll do whatever you least expect, and then assume they'll do it better than you thought possible. That's not very helpful. Nothing about humans is very helpful. That's what makes them so dangerous. Back on Earth, Jake was taking a call from the Galactic Council's new Department of Human Affairs. The entire department had been created specifically to handle Earth-related issues, and their first order of business was ensuring that humanity remained happy and non-aggressive. Captain Morrison, the alien diplomat, said carefully, "We wanted to check on your species' satisfaction with current galactic relations." "We're good," Jake replied. "Thanks for asking. Though I've got to say, your invasion was pretty entertaining. You guys should consider doing it again sometime." "Please don't encourage them," Emily called from across the room. "Actually," Jake continued, "we've been thinking about visiting some of your worlds. You know, cultural exchange, diplomatic relations, that sort of thing." "That would be wonderful," the diplomat replied, though his tone suggested he found the prospect terrifying. "Great. Fair warning, though, we'll probably bring Earth food. I hope you guys like pizza. We'll prepare accordingly." After the call ended, Jake leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You know, Buzz, I think we're going to like being part of the galactic community. As long as they don't try to invade us again." "Oh, they won't. They've learned their lesson." "What lesson is that?" "That humans are the kind of species that turns getting invaded into a learning experience, and then uses that experience to build better weapons." From across the galaxy, alien civilizations watched and waited, hoping that humanity would remain content with their small blue planet. Because if humans ever decided to expand their territory, the galaxy would never be the same. After all, they'd called humans a fairy tale. Now they knew better. Humans were real. Humans were dangerous. And humans were absolutely, completely, utterly impossible to predict. In other words, they were exactly the kind of species you wanted as friends and never, ever wanted as enemies. The galaxy had been warned.